record button right now. And that's being done so that way we could use this after the fact. We'll present it online and we'll throw it up on Facebook. So if anyone watches, misses anything tonight, they'll be able to go back into that link and watch a portion of tonight's presentation again, should you need that. We'll be taking questions and comments throughout the evening, reserving most of that towards the end after we present some information to you. This Zoom meeting is in a webinar format, and that is so our panelists can present that information to you. And in the webinar, you'll have the ability to submit questions or comments using the Q&A functionality. And if you are on a computer, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a bar with several different items, including one in the Q&A. And that is how you can submit your questions to us. All of the questions and comments submitted do get recorded, and our panelists tonight can go back and review and also respond to any that maybe we didn't address. We're going to do our best not to answer the same question multiple times. I'm sure it's possible that others will have, multiple questions, but we'll try to just address one thing, one topic, one time. And one other thing to be aware, if you're on a laptop computer, on the top right corner, you should see a couple options of how you view it. You could look at it in either speaker view or grid view. So that lets you see all the panelists at once or just whoever is presenting and talking at that time. So that's it on the house cleaning items. And looks like we got still a good number on, a couple more joining. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over and introduce our Northeast Regional Manager, Mark Leslie.
Thank you, Jason. I want to welcome everybody to the Zoom call tonight. This is exciting. I understand this is a new way of doing business for us. Generally, we would do this in person, and we're trying to get this done clear back in March, but things changed, and so now we're doing Zoom. And so we really appreciate and welcome everybody tonight. Mark Leslie, I'm the Northeast Region Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I'd like to introduce some of the staffers that are on, our CPW folks that are on the call tonight. Shannon Schaller is our Senior Biologist. Jody Kennedy is our Policy and Planning Advisor. Marty Stratman is a Terrestrial Biologist. Jason Surface, Area Wildlife Manager in the Fort Collins area. Kristen Cannon, Deputy Regional Manager for the Northeast Region. Sarah Studebaker, Policy and Planning Associate. Todd Schmidt, Area Wildlife Manager out in Area 3 Brush, and you've met Jason Clay. So thanks again, appreciate that. We're here tonight to talk about 3 of the very important deer herds on the Northeastern Plains and the management plans associated with that. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife utilizes herd management plans to manage many of our big game species. You'll hear much more detail regarding the process, but these plans are written and updated every 10 years by our biologists with input from the local district wildlife managers, area wildlife managers, and the public. And a very important part of this process is public involvement. And that's where you all come in tonight. We really want to hear your thoughts about these draft plans. Once the plans are in final draft form, they will go to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission for discussion and approval. And those have not been scheduled yet for the approval process for that final approval yet, but we will have that done before too long. So tonight we'll hear first from Senior Biologist Shannon Schaller, and then we'll hear from Todd Schmidt and Marty Stratman and Sarah Studebaker. And you will have the opportunity towards the end of the meeting to ask any questions. And we're going to ask some questions of you. We're going to take a poll, and Sarah will walk you through the polling process and how you'll be able to provide your input into these plans. That information will be compiled in part of our draft planning process as we move forward. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Shannon Schaller, and Shannon can go through a little bit of the DAU or herd management process. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone who is in attendance. We really, like Mark said, we really appreciate you being here and discussing through our herd management plan revisions, and then ultimately giving us feedback on our 3 deer herd management plans on the Eastern Plains. Having public input is one of the most important important pieces of our herd management plan revisions. And from our standpoint, our herd management plans are the guiding documents that give us the sideboards on how we're going to manage each population. We update our plans every 10 years. And so the 3 plans that we're going to discuss tonight encompass a large portion of the Eastern Plains in Colorado in D5, D44, and D54. And so having a large group of people that can give us feedback on all of the considerations that we need to take into account when developing these plans and then ultimately getting them approved is, it's exciting for us. It's, like I said, it's one of the most important documents. Each plan establishes a population objective range and then also a sex ratio objective range. And those ranges that are established in these plans are ultimately what guide our annual license allocation. I'm assuming most people here are hunters or interested in deer and landowners. And so where the rubber meets the road is in that license allocation each year. And so these documents, we get feedback from the public. We consider all the biological information that's collected annually. We take into account the social considerations. And through balancing all of that out, we set the sideboards for managing each one of these herds. And then during our annual license setting, that's ultimately what affects where we go with licenses, up, down, or status quo. So it's pretty important stuff, what we talk about. Each plan, as we go through a revision, as staff, we take our best available biological information, which is generally collected inventory on deer, and we have models and population that we highlight population performance and talk about what that herd is capable of. And then we propose 3 alternative ranges as it relates to the population and the sex ratio objective. So shortly, you're going to hear from Marty Stratman, the biologist on the Eastern Plains, and he's going to outline where we've been with these populations the last 10 years and 3 alternative ranges about where we should go with management of these deer. So your feedback is essential. We really appreciate you being here, and we look forward to giving you a presentation on what we're proposing and hearing feedback from all of you. So thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Todd Schmidt, the Area Wildlife Manager in Area 3, and he can highlight some of the public outreach and the social considerations that we use, which are critically important to our herd management plan process.
Thank you, Shannon. Again, my name is Todd Schmidt. I'm the Area Wildlife Manager out of Brush. My staff and I cover the 6 Northeast counties in Colorado, starting in Fort Morgan and Morgan County, moving on up to Logan County, Sedgwick, Phillips, Yuma, and then Washington County. In that, we have 6 DWMs that cover those counties. And some of the important ways that we try to do our public outreach and our public involvement process for our herd management plans is through those face-to-face contacts with district wildlife managers. Whether it's through hunters or with landowners, they're out on the ground, they see the populations as they are, they encounter and work with you, the landowners, or you, the hunter, to get feedback on how those populations are being handled and what the public in general wants to see. They share that information with a biologist such as Marty. Marty takes all that information, puts it in the count. Marty then spends time sending surveys out, also seeking public input in that way. Once there's a draft herd management plan, those are put out on our website for the public to comment on. And then also we value doing these public meetings. And as we said earlier, this is a different approach for us. It's not something I've been a part of, but yet I'm excited because I know had I done a public meeting in Sterling, I would not have 41 participants in that room. So I'm very encouraged that you guys took time out today to sit here with us, to hear what's going on with deer management on the Eastern Plains, and to give us some of your input. So thank you very much for that. With that now, we'll turn over to Marty Stratman, our terrestrial biologist, and he'll talk to us about the herd management plans.
All right, let me need to share my screen. So I'm Marty Stratman. I'm the wildlife biologist for Area 3 out in Brush. So the kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of this meeting. So the 3 deer management plans that we're referencing tonight are, the first one is D5, which is the North Tablelands deer herd. It's units 87, 88, 89, 90, and 95. Essentially everything from the Wyoming-Nebraska border down to almost the South Platte River. And this DAU covers a little over 4,000 square miles. The next one we'll be talking about is D44, which is the South Platte River deer herd. This is units 91, 92, 96, 94, and 951. And this DAU covers a little over 2,000 square miles. This one is managed for both mule deer and white-tailed deer. And in GMUs 91, 92, and 96, kind of that little ribbon going off to the east, is mostly river bottom habitat, and about 90% of the deer there are whitetails. In contrast, GMUs 94 and 951 on the west end has quite a bit of upland habitat, and so kind of the deer distribution is roughly 60% mule deer and 40% whitetail over there. And then the third one is basically the units south of I-76. So all 3 of these are kind of stacked north to south on each other. This DAU is the South Tablelands and includes GMUs 93, 97, 98, 99, and 100. And this DAU is one of the larger ones. It covers a little over 6,000 square miles. So to get a perspective of where we've been, we'll start with D5 with the North Tablelands. And this mule deer population has been managed with an objective of 24 to 2,700 animals. And modeled estimates show that this herd has increased above objective. And this is mostly because in recent years, you know, we've had a above average fawn production. And in this particular one, lower than expected harvest, which has resulted in post-hunt estimates that exceed the objectives. And so over the past 5 years, this population has averaged about 3,000 mule deer. So the current post-hunt estimate has the herd between 31 and 3,200 mule deer. And the model buck-doe ratio is currently sitting in the upper 30s, which is within the current objective of 35 to 40. And so what we're proposing is that we are going to widen the current objective to 2,500 to 3,000 mule deer to provide a little more management flexibility. But we are, as you can see, chronic wasting disease was 32% in mule deer bucks this last year when we did our comprehensive testing, which is pretty much the highest DAU in the entire state. So with that, we're also proposing that we're going to reduce that buck-doe ratio down to 30 to 35 bucks per 100 to address that really high chronic wasting disease in this herd. And then, so next would be the South Platte River. And this deer herd's been managed with an objective of 35 to 3,800 animals over the last 10 years. And modeled estimates indicate that this herd has been at or slightly above objective for most of that time. And there again, above average fawn production as a result, we get that stuff post-hunt. And so by the time we get it, we are always playing 1 year behind when we're setting license numbers, trying to sort of catch up to the population. So those higher fawn-doe ratios tend to send it a little above objective. And so currently this herd sits just under 4,000 deer. And the model buck-doe ratio is sitting at 40 bucks per 100, which is at the upper end of our of the current objective. And so what we're proposing is that we're going to keep the population the same, basically manage it at 3,500 to 4,000 deer. But there again, because of chronic wasting disease in 2019, you can see it was 26% mule deer bucks and 16% whitetail. And so here again, we're proposing to drop that buck-doe ratio down to 30 to 35 to address that higher CWD prevalence. And then for the south of the interstate, for D54, the South Tablelands, this mule deer herd has had an objective of 29 to 3,100 animals. But the modeled estimates, have this herd that it's been above objective for pretty much the last decade. And it's been, the 10-year average has been about 3,900 animals, and it stayed relatively stable during that time. So the current post-hunt estimate has it at about 3,900 mule deer, and the modeled buck-doe ratio is sitting at about 42 bucks per 100, which is a little above the current objective. And so what we're proposing is basically maintain that current estimate, keeping the population objective at 3,500 to 4,000, but because of, there again, CWD was sitting at 21% in mule deer bucks, so we're looking to, there again, reduce that buck-doe ratio down to 30 to 35 to try to get after that CWD prevalence. And so with that is pretty much the end of my presentation. So
that was a great overview of everything that we've been managing for the last 10 years. And again, how that population is trending from a performance standpoint and the sex ratio. And if anyone on this meeting is interested in seeing the plans in full, they are on our website. And if you go to Colorado Parks and Wildlife website and under search, you type in herd management plans. The 3 draft plans that Marty put together are available for you to read and view on there. And then there's also a link or to Marty's email address if you'd like to submit verbal comments. And one thing I guess I should have mentioned about these herd management plans, not only do they help us understand how we're going to manage a herd from a population standpoint and a sex ratio standpoint, there's a lot of really good historical information in there. And so, you can read through those and have a pretty broad understanding of how deer have been managed even over the last 20 years in those herds. So there's great reference there. Thank you, Marty, for that presentation. The next point here, we would like to get feedback from you all. So hopefully you've had time to digest where we've been and where we're proposing to go with these herds, what they're capable of, what we're balancing for our social considerations. And we have a poll that we get to use, which is kind of fun as a participant. You get to be engaged and give us your feedback and give us some answers on what you're thinking and what you're suggesting for our management. And I'll let Sarah take over from here and introduce the poll to you. So this is the exciting part where you get to give us feedback. We don't get to see your faces, but we get to see your answers. So we're excited for this.
And hey, Shannon, can I just jump in 1 second? I just want to let everybody know that Jody did actually in the chat post the link to the herd management plans for everybody. So if you look down in the chat section, you'll be able to see that and jump right onto it. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon and Jason. Good to be with everyone tonight. I will be walking you through how to give us your feedback in this poll. It is super simple, but it does require you to use a web browser that's outside of this Zoom link. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see this okay? I'm going to take silence as a yes, I think. So this just tells you the web address to put into your web browser. I do recommend doing this on a mobile device if you have a smartphone on you. It's just much easier to keep tabs of this sort of in your hand than flipping back and forth between this and the Zoom screen. So when you put this tqpoll.com link into your web browser, you will go ahead and type in deer as the requested session ID. At that point, it should say polling closed, which is a good sign. It will remain looking that way until I actually open a slide with a polling question for you all. I will go ahead and go to the next. And now I'll let Shannon take it over and read y'all the questions. It looks like the polling is open, Shannon.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. Just a reminder, if someone is having technical difficulties or needs to ask a question, you can type it in the chat. And we have some great staff here to help kind of troubleshoot and get you through this. So we would like to know who is with us tonight. So the first question for you all is, which DAU or data analysis unit do you live in? So you can answer A, D5, B, D44, C, D54, D, I do not live in any of these DAUs, or E, I am not sure.
So I am seeing responses coming in. We're at about 9 right now, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes here. I think last I saw we had about 36 participants plus about 9 of us CPW staff. So I'll wait till we get just a bit closer, and Shannon, I'll let you know when that happens.
And thank you to those that are typing in the chat. We'll record your responses as well. We'll try to give everyone plenty of time to give answers, and then Sarah can see responses, and then she'll let me know, and we'll move on to the next question. And Sarah, remind me again, how many questions do we have?
I believe we have 10 in total,
Okay.
some of which are fairly repetitive. They just apply to different DAUs.
Okay.
And I am seeing a slowdown in responses. It looks like we're at about 15, but again, that's been trending downwards or slowing down. So I think we can go ahead and move on, and I will share the results here now.
Okay, great. Thank you to everyone. And we will show you the results to each question after all the answers come in.
So moving on to the next question.
Okay, so another question that we're interested in is, what are your interests? And so this question is directed at getting an idea of which DAU you're most interested in. So question number 2, which DAU are you most interested in? A, D5, which is north of the South Platte River. B, D44, which is basically the South Platte River and some uplands. C, D54, south of Interstate 76. D, more than one, or E, I am not sure. Again, thank you to those who are typing in the chat. We'll record your answers that way.
So I am not seeing any new responses come in, so I'll go ahead and share the results.
All right.
Moving on to question 3.
So question number 3, which of the following best describes how you interact with deer in DAUs 5, 44, and 54? And the important part on this is please select all that apply to you. So A, as a landowner, B, as a hunter, C, as a livestock or ag producer, D, as a general outdoor recreationist, E, as a guide and outfitter, or F, other. Again, please select all that apply to your interest in any one of the DAUs that you're interested in.
So it looks like everyone who's logged into this polling has shared a result with me or response. And the results are here.
All right, we've got a great mix of people. It's great to see. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so this slide is just to give us a little background. So as Marty touched on in his presentation, that we do have high CWD prevalence rates in these 3 DAUs. And actually we have some of the highest prevalence rates in the state for CWD. And our own Colorado Parks and Wildlife Response Plan directs us as managers to reduce CWD prevalence if a herd is above 5% or more. And that plan is on our website as well, but that's kind of our main threshold for directing us to implement management strategies if a herd is at 5% or greater. And so for D5, for all adult buck deer, 31%, D44, 21%, D54, 22%. Next slide, Sarah. So we're interested in your feedback about CWD management. So question number 4, please. Should CWD management be an important factor in the future management of Eastern Plains deer herds across all 3 DAUs, D5, D44, D54? A, yes, B, no, C, I am not sure.
Okay, looks like we have 15 out of the 16 folks logged in. So I will go ahead and advance.
Thank you.
Moving on to question 5.
Okay, so the next series of questions will relate to how should we set our sex ratio objective in our herd management plans. And I'll just say generally that our herds on the plains are performing quite well from a population standpoint and from the number of bucks on the landscape and even older age class bucks. But we have interest hearing back from you how you would like to see us manage our buck numbers on the landscape. So question number 5, how would you like to see the number of buck licenses managed for D5? Again, these are the units north of the South Platte River. Currently, the objective is set at 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. And the current estimate observed from winter inventory is that our buck ratio is sitting at 38 bucks per 100 does. And the options available are A, manage for moderate hunting opportunity and high quality bucks, which is currently where we're managing. B, moderately increase the number of buck licenses and reduce the number of mature bucks to balance hunting opportunity with CWD management. C, significantly increase the number of buck licenses to reduce the number of mature bucks in reference to CWD management. And D, I am not sure.
I know this one's kind of long, so I'll just give it about another 20 seconds or so. All right, so it looks like we have full response there. And moving on to question number 6.
So question number 6 is the same format, just now we're talking about D44. So how would you like to see the number of buck licenses managed for D44, which include the South Platte River units? So currently the objective is the same as D5, 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. Currently we estimate 43 bucks per 100 does. And again, the same options A, B, C, and D to answer question relating to D44's sex ratio.
All right, full 16 responses. Moving on to results first. And now on to question 7.
So question 7, we get at D54, same format as the last two. How would you like to see the number of buck licenses managed for D54 south of the interstate? So the current objective is the same as the previous, 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does. Current estimate is 43, and same options A, B, C, and D, please.
Here are the results for question 7. And on to question 8.
Okay, so now we'll start talking about your interest in how we manage the population levels. If you recall in Marty's presentations, you saw where our current objective ranges were. And in all 3 of these DAUs, that population is trending above the current objective range. And that's because our herds on the plains, again, are doing quite well. You know, we continue to have fawn numbers well above the statewide average. So with that in mind, you'll have seen that Marty and the rest of CPW are proposing objective ranges that allow for maximum flexibility and then encompass where we're estimating populations at now. So in general, they're a shift upward in our proposed objective ranges. So question number 8, I'll read to you and then give you the options. How would you like to see the population managed in D5? So that current population objective range is at 2,400 to 2,700 deer, and the current estimate is just slightly is above that current objective range at 3,100 deer. So option A, reduce the population objective range and the current population size or estimate. B, maintain the current population objective, which would mean reducing the population size. Or C, increase the population objective to encompass the current population size. And D, I am not sure.
Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Here are the results for question 8, and moving on now to question 9.
So question 9, same format as the previous question. How would you like to see the population managed in D44? The current population objective is 3,500 to 3,800 deer, and the current estimate is just under 4,000 deer. So the same options in A, B, C, and D for D44 as well.
All right, results are here. And we will move on to our final question, number 10.
So final question is D54. How would you like to see the population managed in D54? Currently, the objective range is set at 2,900 to 3,100, and the current estimated population size is 3,800. And again, same options A through D.
Alrighty, here are your results for question 10. So I will go ahead, Shannon, and stop sharing my screen here. I will share in the chat to everybody a link to a an online survey that you can take. So if tonight you are unable to log into this TT poll website, you should be able to go to this link, which I believe will also be provided on the CPW herd management plan webpage, but you can directly click it here as well. So these will be the same exact questions you saw here tonight. You'll just be able to answer them on your own time up until, I believe, August 28th.
Thank you, Sarah. And like Sarah said, we'll have that link available on our website on that herd management plan. So if you weren't able to provide feedback, technical difficulties or whatever, feel free to fill that out. And then again, if you know someone who wasn't able to attend and you think they would be interested in providing feedback, then encourage them to go to that site and give us that feedback. So thank you. That's very helpful information for us as we navigate through our proposal to the ultimately what we recommend to the commission for approval. And I think at this point, we're interested if you have questions regarding either the 3 current plans and our proposed objective ranges, or I guess anything on these 3 herd management plans, if you have any questions there. And I'll kick it back to the rest of the panel if you have any comments or any statements for the good of the group. But thanks everybody for taking the time. That feedback for us is the most valuable piece of information that we can get in a summarized nutshell.
And once again, to ask us the questions, please use the Q&A format that you can see at the bottom of your screen. Do type in your questions to us and we'd be happy to address them.
So we do have, the first question came in, and I think this would likely be addressed to Marty or Shannon. The question is there a reason, oops, sorry, move that. Is there a reason why the draft D44 HMP deer population harvest sex ratio estimates only go back to 2009? 25-year data or longer would be helpful.
Well, I guess I can address it. It's really just kind of semantics of it. I typically only present the last 10 years, while there's some interest in longer, data stuff. Certainly we have all that information, the harvest and the sex ratios and all that kind of stuff, but it's really just for presenting what's happened in the last 10 years, because in a lot of respects, what was harvested for instance, in the mid to late 90s is kind of irrelevant in today's world, because we had, populations were completely different. Sex ratios were different, a lot of that stuff. So really all these plans, I only go back 10 years because that's the most relevant to the current situation, because what happened in the mid 90s really doesn't hold a lot of water to what we are doing, what's going on now and what's happening now. And of course, a lot of the, some of the habitats changed, land use practices, different stuff like that, whether it's the river or even outside of it. That's really the reason why I didn't present a lot of that older stuff, because it's really just purely historical, but no real relevance to managing today.
Thanks, Marty. So good evening, everyone. This is Jody Kennedy. Again, I'm with the Policy and Planning section at CPW, and I'm helping with question and answers tonight. So our next question actually came in over the chat, and it is asking, how do we propose to manage the chronic wasting disease challenges in this in the northeastern part of the state? So I know that's a big question, but maybe I'll turn that over to I'm not sure, Shannon or Marty, if one of you wants to take that.
I'll jump in with the start of an answer, and then anyone else feel free to jump in. So as I mentioned before, we have a approved CWD response plan, the commission approved, and it's a document that outlines numerous strategies for reducing chronic wasting disease. And these management strategies are designed to work hand in hand with our herd management plan. So for an example, one of the strategies is to reduce older age class bucks on the landscape. And I'll say that, you know, like Jody said, that's a big question. There are a lot of knowns with CWD, and then there still are a lot of unknowns with CWD. And we're trying to tackle the knowns that we have. And one of the knowns that we have is that older age class bucks have higher prevalence rates than does. And we also know that directing harvest toward bucks, and specifically older age class bucks, can reduce prevalence and or keep it steady. You know, based on what we've seen harvest strategies applied across the state, we know that in areas where we don't increase licenses, or we actually decrease licenses and we have prevalence, it tends to increase on us. But in other areas of the state where we direct harvest toward bucks, we can keep that prevalence from increasing or decreasing. So that's one of the knowns we have. That's one of the strategies. When Marty talks about reducing that sex ratio objective to 30 to 35, that's one of our strategies for attempting to reduce prevalence. We did mandatory testing in 2019. We'll repeat it in 5 years. And one of the outcomes we hope in being able to implement strategies like reducing the number of bucks on the landscape and then retesting is we get to understand how those management strategies did or did not affect CWD prevalence. And then there are other ways to attempt to reduce CWD prevalence. One option is to reduce deer abundance. You know, there's, again, we're going off of what we have knowns. There's a myriad of things with, you know, concentrating deer or having deer on the landscape that's correlated to CWD hotspots. So that's another strategy for it. We're trying to get as much information about CWD and prevalence and our different management strategies. And we're actually trying to compare those so that we can best understand how to reduce prevalence. But please understand, we know it's a huge issue. We're trying to gain as more knowns than unknowns. But for these 3 deer plans, understanding what prevalence is and then implementing those strategies outlined in our CWD response plan, like directing harvest at older age class bucks, is one of the primary strategies we're using. And by all means, if anyone, Marty or Todd or Mark, has anything else, please jump in with that.
No, I think you pretty much answered it.
I would add that one thing that I think Marty has done well in these plans is we're not trying to address harvest of bucks and population reduction at the same time, right? That we're looking at one piece of a puzzle at a time and then sampling and seeing the effects of that management strategy, and then having the possibility to do it different the next 5 years to see how those 2 strategies might work independently instead of doing them jointly and not understanding which one had the better effect or the most effect. Did that make sense? Okay.
And I'd also like to say that our private landowners are so important out on the Eastern Plains, and we cannot achieve our management goals and objectives without your cooperation and your help with this, because we understand that much of the wildlife is provided by the habitat that you all provide. So we have to try to balance the number of animals on the landscape with the availability and your tolerance for having hunters out there in some cases. So this is a complex little problem. It's not like necessarily public land situations where the animals are on the public land during the hunting season and we have the availability to go and take care of whatever issues we're trying to address. So it's definitely a delicate balance, and we appreciate all of your cooperation and your partnership on this.
Okay, another question here. It seems that despite high CWD prevalence among bucks, these particular populations are pretty strong. Is decreasing prevalence an important management goal for these DAUs in and of themselves, or is it more important as a means of avoiding spread to other DAUs?
Well, really, it's both. I mean, obviously, you know, we tested clear back in 2000, you know, when we first found it out in here, and prevalence was a lot lower. And if you notice, when you look at those DAUs, you see that D5, you know, has the highest, but as we move down the South Platte and then to D54, kind of that prevalence rate has slowly gone down. And you look across the Eastern Plains, when you start grading down into the Southeast region, there again, the prevalence rate gets less and less. So it does have, you know, yeah, we are trying to address it so that way we can slow the spread anyway. But it also is a management goal because these, you know, CWD, it's a fatal disease, period. You know, when they get it, they're going to die from it. Either they get harvested by a hunter or they're going to die on their own. And if they're old enough, you know, they'll die within, you know, 18 months to 2 years. So, you know, trying to save bucks to, you know, for future hunting and that kind of thing at that rate, you know, you're going to be losing some of those older age bucks every year that didn't get harvested this past fall. Some of those older age will be dead before we ever hit the next hunting season. It's just the way it is with CWD. So, because there again, you can look at it this way. In 2019, you know, 1 out of every 3 older age bucks, which we consider anything above 2.5 years old. So those 3 and up year old bucks, you know, 1 out of every 3 had it. And now that was from the harvest. So you can easily extrapolate that to the entire population, all the bucks that weren't harvested, you know, 1 out of every 3 has CWD. And some of those bucks have already had it probably for almost a year. They just haven't gotten to clinical signs that, you know, that people think about. You know, they're still running around. They appear healthy, but they've been running around for a year, because when the onset of that, those late stages before they die, you know, that's when you see the skinny, you know, poor body condition, that kind of thing. So some of these animals have already been running around with it for over a year, and they're fixing to die, and they probably will have died since the last hunting season till this fall. Some of those bucks aren't going to be out there. They're just they're going to die over, and coyotes clean those things up. I know a lot of people say, well, we're not seeing them, but there's a lot of open country out there that people, you know, it doesn't take long for coyotes to clean up a deer in a matter of a few days. So yeah, it is. It's more to address this issue because it's not going to get any better. You know, 1 out of every 3 bucks up in D5, it's only going to get worse. And eventually the entire, you know, it'll just continue to climb. I mean, there's some herds up in Wyoming where it's well above 30%, and they're seeing massive population declines. And, you know, does get it as well. And that's really the big deal with the 5% threshold, because in does, as that, even though the prevalence rate in does is less than what it is in bucks, once they, you know, the more that bucks have it, the more it's going to be spread to the does, and the higher their prevalence, and then it's going to start impacting the actual population numbers, where there's nothing we're going to be able to do, and the population will just start to decline on its own. We are somewhat lucky out here in the Eastern Plains because of all the agriculture that sits out here. You know, a lot of the so-called effects of CWD, we're able to still maintain, you know, decent populations and high numbers of animals because of the, you know, high fawn production. And a lot of it has to do with the habitat and primarily the mixture of agriculture that we got throughout a lot of these DAUs. So it's kind of masking some of the stuff that
Marty.
you can find.
I thought I was unmuted. Sorry about that. We have another question that came in, and I would say this will go to probably a culmination of Area 3 from Marty, Shannon, and Todd may be able to chime in as well. Can we increase the number of whitetail only tags in 99? I think even if they are whitetail doe only tags, it would slow the increasing proportion of whitetails there and give muleys an advantage. I prefer more whitetail buck tags as well, since they're more aggressive than muley bucks, it appears.
Well, I can answer that real quick. We can easily increase tags, and we did for this upcoming hunting season. We actually increased an extra 100 either sex tags on those whitetail only, as well as another 100 doe tags. And we can certainly go up. We typically don't just throw out, thousands of tags just because, there aren't that many of them out there. There are some localized areas where the numbers are higher, but we did increase tags this last year, and if need be, we can increase them again next year.
I would just echo what Marty said, and that is over the last several years, I know that we've increased them, and we like to look at, how the hunter success is, as well as our population and management objectives when we set our licenses, and we do that each spring. So.
All right, I've got the next question, which is specific to GMUs 95 and 951. And there's asking if there is any way to increase the population for those GMUs. And it looks like maybe Marty or Todd are best to address this.
Yes and no. 95 is a little easier because licenses are specific there. 951 is kind of complicated because it has, it's got the river bottom coming through, but then it's got all that upland up to the north. And some of that ground isn't necessarily accessible. There's some large landowners in those units. So yes and no, we can, but we kind of have to look at it as a GMU as a whole. That's one of the tough spots when there's localized areas where, for whatever reason, there's not many deer in it, but yet other portions, we've got too many deer. So it's a little difficult. So the best way I can address it is we can only look at it from a GMU as a whole when it comes to increasing or decreasing the population.
I would agree with Marty. I would also add that since D5 has our greatest CWD prevalence of these three H&Ps, I would be cautious about wanting to increase that population.
Okay, next question. The herd around my area has just started coming back from the last time they were eradicated. I'm in the northern part of my unit where it is prairie and less deer. The southern part of the unit is near the river where there are more deer. Would it be a viable option to further direct where your efforts focused be to address it through landowner vouchers, where more or less are awarded for the targeted areas? And speaking of Unit 951.
Well, we recently addressed that related to mule deer, and we created, which will come online actually this fall, where we have a subunit in 951 that just encompasses just the river bottom, trying to address mule deer, bucks in particular, in that particular area of the South, or of that South Platte River. So that way we're not artificially harvesting, you know, a lot of mule deer outside the river bottom, because that seems to be where we wanted to focus our hunting efforts. So we did create a subunit that just encompasses just the river bottom. So I think that gets at what you were asking.
One thing I would add too is that with our CWD sampling efforts, we try to identify hotspots and direct harvest that way as well. So we're trying to better understand where we have more deer and potentially have hotspots. And Area 3 staff and Marty try their best to work with landowners. Like Mark said, they're such an integral part of us achieving harvest and working on CWD. But we are trying to identify where we might have the ability to achieve harvest because the deer are there and higher prevalence. So we are cognizant of that and trying different licensing to direct that harvest. Jason, do you have another question for the panel?
I do, sorry. So next question would be, if you're looking to increase buck harvest of mule deer due to CWD, can you decrease the harvest of muley does to maintain their total population?
Yeah, we can. And actually we do that every year, because basically the doe licenses, that's where the populate, you know, they're the drivers of overall population numbers. So doe licenses are always set to, you know, stay within that population objective, where for CWD, that's where the buck doe ratio. So then buck licenses are sort of done separately on that. So yes, we can very easily do that, and we do that every year. So the doe licenses, really, that whether they're increased or decreased is based on, you know, fawn production for that year, and then how, where we sit from a population estimate side in setting those.
Okay, I've got the next question. There's one that's asking about private land, specifically in D44, and how we plan to increase harvest in this DAU. Increasing licenses doesn't translate to higher harvest if new hunters don't have access to private land. So they're asking if we're considering ways to give more opportunity or flexibility to the landowner preference program hunters to allow more harvest.
Well, I guess I can attempt to address that. When it comes to, at least from a harvest perspective, you know, we do have those private land only doe tags and private land buck tags, and we do actually get really good harvest on it. That's really been a nice balance, especially in 96, 91, and 92. Those 3 units, that's where we have that private land only buck and doe tags, and they seem to work quite well, because there is a lot of private land in there, but we still get really good harvest, and actually that's our saving grace for maintaining this population, because without that, that's really where the bulk of the harvest actually comes from, are those private land tags. It does help having those run through January. So, you know, if we need to harvest more deer, we can certainly do it. You know, the buck side, it's easy to, you know, harvest more bucks. You know, that's increasing that harvest is not a big issue. Guys love to, but on the doe side, they've worked really well, and it actually balances out really well with the public land, you know, with all the public land we have in those units. So as far as the LPP, you know, that's, you know, a lot of those things are all set in statute. So that's kind of out of our wheelhouse when it comes to being able to manipulate the number of licenses, you know, giving more to landowners and stuff like that. You know, so I don't know if anybody else wants to try to address that further when it comes to the you know, the landowner preference system.
Yeah, when it comes to LPP, that's something that landowners would work with their local district wildlife manager to look at their eligibility as well as getting themselves enrolled into that program. It's not a difficult process, but it is a process, and it's something that can be done basically each winter to prepare for the next fall. And so any landowners that are interested in that, I'd encourage you to contact me, and I can get you in touch with your local district wildlife manager to find out whether or not your properties could be enrolled in that program.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what both Marty and Todd said, that Marty alluded to it, that the LPP program is dictated through statute. So we work within sideboards with the landowners on that. So there are some sideboards there, and but again, like Todd said, it is a good program, and it does offer a lot of opportunity to landowners to get hunters on their property. And speaking for the Weld County and that very little bit of eastern Larimer County that are in these DAUs, just if you have an interest in that, please contact the Fort Collins office for that area. And as Todd said, I'll get you in touch with the appropriate DWM to get that program started for you.
Yeah, that was a great question. Folks, I also noticed that it's 7:35 according to the clock on my computer, and I want to be cognizant of your time. We told you that this would be an hour-long meeting. And so for those of you that participated and would like to finish up, I appreciate your time here, and I appreciate you answering our poll questions, whether you did it now or whether you're going to do it in the future through the link that we provided. For those of you that still have questions, I'm sure that some of us would be happy to stay online. I can speak for myself. I'm happy to stay here and continue to work through those. But I do want to give those who have other things to do this evening an opportunity to check out at this point. Mr. Clay, is there an appropriate way to do that, or was that sufficient?
Thank you, Todd. Very, very well. For those that are checking out, this Zoom meeting is being recorded again, and we'll publish it. We can publish it both on Colorado Parks and Wildlife's YouTube page and the statewide Facebook page. So if you need to go back and review anything, you'll have that opportunity to do so there. And then for those that are going to stay on, I believe we still have a couple questions left in the queue that maybe we could move forward to and keep addressing. And one of them could go for, I guess maybe Marty or Shannon could address it, but it's just simply, does CWD affect antelope as well as deer?
No, it doesn't. CWD is only, the two species are way different taxonomically. And so CWD, not yet anyway, we've never found it in antelope. So it's just primarily a deer issue is all that is.
So the next one would be, if we are considering private land only tags for 951, which
I would probably say no, just because there's only a couple of public land. You've got Centennial, right? I think I'm Jason. There's basically, there's only like two on the river, and then there's a couple of other small, tiny little parcels over there. Jason, you'd have to help me with those. But by and large, when you look at 951, it's 99.5% private land already. So there's really no need for a private land only tag when there's so little public land and we can address that on a property basis if we needed to. But no, there probably would not consider anything related to a PLO in that unit.
Right, because I would echo what you said, Marty. I mean, really, if you're going to hunt 951 and without some sort of opportunity to get on private land, you're going to have a tough hunt without that. So I would say the vast majority of our hunting on in that unit is on private land as it is. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, which came up in the Q&A, and it also came up in the chat, which is related to collaborating with neighboring states in regard to CWD. So there's a question specifically about D5, and is there collaboration with Wyoming and Nebraska divisions of wildlife? And a similar question in the chat.
I'll take a stab at that one, and then anyone can fill in. So we do our best to collaborate with our neighboring states, and especially the field staff who have herds that cross state boundaries. So Marty and the DWMs that have, you know, GMUs that border Wyoming, they do a lot of informal communication. We also have our state vet is the former Wyoming state vet. And so a lot of information sharing is pretty easy for us as far as Wyoming goes, because a lot of what's been conducted from CWD and learning lessons and how to move forward, we get directly from Dr. Mary Wood. And I know at, you know, Mark Leslie's level, there's, you know, higher level communication that goes on between states. So we do our best to learn from other states and collaborate. You know, we have, you know, statewide and we have nationwide meetings of some of our leadership team where we do talk about big issues like CWD, and we try to be consistent and have the best available science. So yes, we do collaborate with our neighboring states. And I don't know if Mark, you want to add anything on that, or anyone else?
Thanks, Shannon. Yes, we do collaborate with them, but obviously state management of the resources within those state boundaries falls entirely within the purview of that particular wildlife agency or Parks and Wildlife Agency. And so everybody's got different strategies and different ways to approach an issue. And as far as chronic wasting disease goes, Colorado was pretty aggressive early on, as Marty alluded to maybe 20 years ago, and maybe one of the chat questions alluded to as well. And so I think actually we ultimately reap the benefits from being a little bit proactive and aggressive with some of our CWD management that we're seeing in the areas around Fort Collins, for instance, in our D4 herds. But to get back to your question, yeah, yes, we do collaborate. We week before last, we had a tri-state meeting with Wyoming and Utah to discuss management issues that were common to everyone. And so it's always good to talk to our counterparts in other states.
I believe we may have accomplished answering all your questions. And thank you, everyone. Stick with us. We're trying to keep up with chat and questions coming into our panelists, and doing this for the first time and directing it to the right staff. And so I guess last call to our helpful staff here, and any questions that we need to address before we can close out for the evening.
It looks like we answered all the questions in the Q&A in the chat. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. And again, if anyone has comments or questions, you know, get a hold of us, and we'd be happy to talk with you about it. And if you want to read the plans, they're on the website. Thank you very much to everyone for your questions, for your feedback, for your interest, for your time tonight. For our first herd management plan public Zoom meeting, I feel pretty good about it, and it couldn't have gone so well without all of your help. And I want to say thank you to all of the CPW staff who have put a lot of time into making this run really smooth, and for helping us as a staff get the needed feedback from the public to help us put together, you know, the final pieces of our herd management plan. So thank you to the public, and thank you to CPW for being here and taking the time and the help.
Shannon, thank you. And I'd like to also offer my thanks to everyone because this is so important to our mission of managing your wildlife resource out there. So your public participation is so important to us, and we really are open to hearing what you have to say. And this is an important process. And you'll also be able to provide input to the commission when these plans come up for review at the commission level. So stay tuned for that. So thank you very much for all of your time and everyone on the call.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.